At my kitchen table, my mother-in-law confronted me boldly, informing me she'd given away my flight ticket, not to an error or stranger, but to the man who had physically harassed me. My wife, seated beside her, remained silent. This silence marked the end of my attempts at maintaining harmony and the beginning of gathering evidence. Just 10 minutes after making a single call, 3 individuals in that house paled, comprehending my profession and the consequences when I ceased to be patient. Terrence Aldridge is my name. 42 years old, managing logistics for a distribution firm based in Macon, Georgia, responsible for freight transport across 6 states, overseeing 140 drivers, and resolving issues that could escalate into 5-figure losses when they occur at 3 a.m. My skills excel at work due to my ability to spot patterns overlooked by others, my foresight in planning multiple steps ahead, and my calmness under pressure when situations unravel. Amazingly, these same talents proved equally useful within a marriage, an application I hadn't anticipated. If you're new, subscribe, leave a comment about your location, and like this post before proceeding, as the narrative takes a turn for the worse before improving, and I want you here for the uplifting part. To fully comprehend that Tuesday in my kitchen, it's essential to understand the events leading up to it, and trust me, every detail matters. 14 years ago, at a physical therapy clinic in Warner Robins, I crossed paths with Bridget Holloway. She was manning the front desk, where I visited twice weekly for a shoulder injury sustained from improperly lifting cargo over a decade. In the waiting room, her hearty laugh echoed, her dark red hair often escaping from a clip that struggled to hold it back. She had an uncanny ability to recall trivial details about people, which made one feel significant. After just one visit, she remembered my coffee order. Following the second encounter, she knew I owned a dog named Scout. By the 4th appointment, I invited her for dinner, and she agreed even before I completed my question. Unbeknownst to me at the time, and something I wouldn't discover until 8 more months had passed, Bridget was recovering from a marriage that left deep scars. Her former husband, Colin Redding, had exercised almost total dominion over her life for 4 long years. He decided where she went, with whom she conversed, what she wore when stepping out, and when his power wasn't sufficient, he resorted to physical violence. She narrated her tale one late night on my back porch, her voice devoid of emotion due to its repeated telling. She displayed the aged police report. She explained her 2-week stay with her cousin in Valdosta before she departed. I embraced her as she wept, and my words were sincere when I assured her that life like that was no longer a possibility for her, not under my roof. I wished to be truthful. I didn't wed Bridget to save her. I married her because I loved her, because she brought humor into my life that no one else could, because she noticed the little things and made me feel valued as well. However, a silent vow existed within me. I would never cause her to feel insignificant. I would never be the trigger for her startle reflex. We exchanged vows in a modest ceremony at a vineyard outside Perry, Georgia. 60 attendees, Bridget's mother weeping throughout the event, my mother gleefully announcing to anyone who listened that she had finally obtained a daughter. At Bridget's wedding, Denise Holloway, Bridget's mother, tightly embraced me and declared I was the best thing that ever happened to her daughter. I found her words believable. I had no reason not to. For the initial few years, things were favorable, truly so. We acquired a house in a tranquil subdivision outside Macon, one with sidewalks and an underused community pool. Bridget resumed her education in medical billing and landed a stable job at a downtown hospital network. I was promoted twice, transitioning from dispatch coordinator to regional operations, and we began discussions about children, although it never materialized. Later, we both accepted this and constructed a life around each other instead. Sunday mornings were pancakes and quiet college football games. Friday nights were takeout dinners and the show she was currently hooked on that month. It wasn't extravagant. The flaws didn't appear abruptly. They manifested gradually, much like rust does, slowly in areas seldom examined frequently. It commenced, truth be told, with Denise. My mother-in-law held onto the notion that her daughter had married below her class, despite my consistent earnings and our home never giving the impression of financial tension. Denise hailed from a family who owned property near Athens, money in Georgia terms, albeit faded, yet still proud. She could never fully accept that her daughter picked a logistics manager over the kind of man she had envisioned for her. Instead, she got me, a man whose occupation involves conversing with truck drivers and sometimes carries a diesel sent home on certain nights. Denise didn't vocalize these feelings directly. She was too refined for that. Rather than expressing it directly, her remarks seemed like compliments if not heard carefully enough during Thanksgiving. "Terrence, you work so tirelessly, don't you?" she'd say, in a tone that subtly framed hard work as a substitute reward. Or she'd mention Mark Delacroix, Bridget's ex-boyfriend from high school, at every family gathering, almost ritualistically, discussing his accomplishments as a commercial real estate broker in Atlanta, and how he still inquired about Bridget whenever he encountered his mother at church. Mark and Bridget dated for 2 years before they went to separate colleges, well before they knew their future selves. From what Bridget shared, the breakup was relatively peaceful when distance took its course, with no drama involved. Just distance, as it often does. However, Denise held a deep affection for Mark that suggested she had not fully accepted that her daughter's tale with him had ended. Denise maintained contact with her mother and appreciated her posts on Facebook. On numerous awkward holiday gatherings, Denise humorously commented about how Bridget and Mark were once the popular couple of their graduating class, seemingly as a form of flattery towards the man Bridget eventually married. I ignored it for years, convincing myself it was harmless nostalgia from a mother longing for a part of her daughter's life she had envisioned. I told myself I was being sensitive, that a secure partner wouldn't be troubled by an old high school sweetheart's mention at Thanksgiving. I ate my turkey and smiled, choosing to overlook the comments multiple times because I cherished Bridget and didn't want our family dinners to become arguments. It wasn't until much later that I truly realized Denise wasn't merely reminiscing, she was constructing something. Gradually, over several years, she allowed a door that should have been sealed on our wedding day to remain ajar, and Bridget, for reasons I'm still trying to comprehend, didn't intervene. Denise's mother kept it open, not forcefully but persistently. Each time, Bridget laughed it off with the familiar, tired laugh that suggested that's just mom being mom, and steered the conversation elsewhere. Now let me explain about the trip, because it was during this vacation that everything fell apart, and I want you to grasp the sequence of events accurately as they unfolded, since the order is crucial. For the past 6 years, Bridget's family has arranged an annual group excursion involving not just us, but also her parents, her brother's family, 2 cousins and their spouses, and a group of Denise's closest friends who have essentially become part of the family. Last year, we visited a lake house in North Carolina. The previous year, we stayed at a resort in Destin. This year, they had been anticipating a grand getaway, spending a week at a beachfront property in Hilton Head, South Carolina, starting from early June. In total, there would be 16 of us, and Denise found a place boasting a private pool and enough bedrooms for everyone to have their personal space. Bridget had been looking forward to this for months, talking about new swimsuits and filling up her Pinterest board with beach fashion ideas. Despite not being her usual cup of tea, I was excited for her because it's important to her, as her family has generally been civil towards me, though Denise never quite stopped mentioning Mark's name in her routine. Approximately 5 weeks before the trip, Bridget approached me on a Sunday evening at our kitchen island, the same place where events eventually took a turn for the worst, and she mentioned offhand that her mother wanted to extend invitations to a few more guests to fill up the remaining 2 bedrooms at the rental. "All right," I replied. "Which individuals are these?" She named 2 unfamiliar faces, acquaintances of her cousin's spouse, and then casually mentioned Mark might join too, as he and her brother had rekindled their bond over golf, making it enjoyable for everyone. Let me clarify a point. I didn't erupt, I didn't shatter anything or elevate my tone. I posed a straightforward question. "Might this situation be uncomfortable for us, for me?" Bridget seemed puzzled by the query. "Terrence, we are no longer in a romantic relationship, having last dated when we were 19. At this stage, he functions more as a family friend." I held my peace. I assured her I trusted her discretion, but requested to be kept informed, particularly since, from what I gathered, this was intended as a family excursion, and Mark is not part of the family. 3 weeks prior to the trip, the second piece of information came to light, which should have given me all the clarity I needed, had I been more attentive. At a barbecue, Bridget's brother Dale playfully suggested that it would be symbolic if Colin attended, as Colin had reached out to Dale via Facebook several months prior, expressing his desire to reconnect with the family. Hearing Colin's name sent a chill down my spine. Colin, Bridget's former husband, was the man who physically abused her, a fact I had witnessed myself in an old police report I'd read on the back porch years ago. Upon noticing my discomfort, Bridget looked uneasy but not as disturbed as I expected her to be. "Dale's just joking," she said briskly. "No one is inviting Colin anywhere." Dale later confirmed that he was mostly joking, but added that Denise had also brought up the possibility, citing everyone having grown and water under the bridge, a phrase that matched exactly, suggesting this wasn't an impromptu joke from Dale. This discussion had transpired elsewhere as I wasn't present in the room at the time. Later that night in our bedroom, I queried Bridget point-blank. "Has your mother ever discussed the possibility of inviting Colin on this trip?" Bridget momentarily paused, a duration just sufficient for me to discern her response. She had mentioned it once before, but I had turned down the idea. "It's not going to happen, Terrence," she assured me. I largely trusted her assertion, though a lingering instinct that has safeguarded my company from unfavorable freight contracts and untrustworthy carriers over the years cautioned me to be more vigilant, to document matters carefully. Not because I suspected Bridget of deceit, but because, after 14 years of marriage and 20 years in logistics, I've learned that "it's taken care of" requires verification, as it imposes no cost and blind trust can lead to devastating consequences. Thus, I began archiving relevant information. Forwarded screenshots of Bridget's group texts and emails from the rental coordinator, which were also sent to the group, did not establish a case against my wife. Instead, I was recording a recurring pattern, similar to how I would compile data on delayed shipments before discussing it with the vendor. 2 weeks prior to the trip, the pattern became much more apparent. Ashley, Bridget's cousin and a member of our family group chat, shared a screenshot of the final rental headcount sent by Denise, which included all attendees. Among them was Mark Delacroix, listed between her husband and one of Denise's book club friends. The presence of Mark, who was also scheduled to attend the trip with my wife, was no longer a hypothesis but a confirmed guest with a reserved bedroom. I chose not to respond in the family group chat. Called Bridget instead for an unfiltered explanation. She was working, so I waited till nightfall. By then, 6 hours had passed and I was less agitated than I might have been. Truthfully, a composed self elicits more truth than an angry one does. "Mark is on the final list," I informed her as soon as she entered. She placed her bag gently. "I'm aware. I told Mom I wasn't enthusiastic about it, but Dale was the one who extended the invitation, not me. Now he considers Mark his friend too. I can't control who my brother invites to a house that Mom is co-owning. The issue is whether I attend a trip where he resides with us for a week, which we should discuss as a pair, not learn from a group chat screenshot." She expressed regret. She admitted she ought to have disclosed her hesitation earlier, as she anticipated the discussion would distress me, and in retrospect, postponing it had exacerbated matters rather than improved them. I acknowledged her candor, reciprocating with my own sentiment. We decided that I would attend the event, emphasizing that Mark's presence needn't be a significant issue, considering we were mature individuals and I trusted her judgment. If the situation felt uncomfortable once we arrived, we pledged to address it collaboratively. I wanted you to recognize this. I wasn't seeking a pretext to derail the trip. Instead, I was searching for evidence of my wife's trustworthiness, gradually extending my faith, even as circumstances became unstable beneath me. This isn't weakness. It's what 14 years of marriage entails, giving someone the advantage of the doubt until they provide a solid reason not to. 14 years ago, Bridget and Colin were together. 19 days prior to their journey, her phone vibrated on the kitchen counter during her shower. She wasn't snooping. She simply noticed the pattern of notifications on her phone, which indicated active messaging, not a solitary text. It was Colin R.'s name that caught her attention when she glanced at it from the corner of her eye as she cooked dinner. She didn't intervene with her phone, for she had never been that kind of husband who meddled with his wife's messages. However, his name lingered in her memory, and when Bridget joined her below stairs, still damp-haired after 20 minutes, I asked her directly, "Did Colin message you about the trip?" Her face transformed in a manner she hadn't displayed in 14 years of companionship. It became motionless, as if calculating anew. "You conveyed to me that you did not want Colin present on our trip, a sentiment which I still hold true. However, it seemed as though Bridget's refusal wasn't respected by others due to Denise constantly renegotiating her daughter's boundaries. 4 days prior to the journey, I requested the genuine guest list from Bridget, wanting full transparency about who would be in our shared space for a week. She brought up the list on her phone, now updated to 18 names instead of 16. Mark Delacroix was still present, with a new name added 2 days prior, Colin Redding. A note beside it from Denise verified his residence in the East Wing. Upon seeing this, Bridget paled. This wasn't sanctioned. I had expressly forbidden it. Although I trusted her, I felt something inside me irrevocably change when I realized that a family collectively deemed a woman's explicit no concerning an abuser as negotiable and overridable if enough relatives consented to it. And within this decision, it seemed that my presence in the house, my comfort, my safety, my position as her husband, had become irrelevant to everyone except Bridget and me. In my line of work, it's crucial to comprehend my role as it determines the sequence of events that followed. In logistics, when a vendor breaches a contract, you don't resort to shouting over the phone. Shouting offers no benefit for getting freight transported. Instead, what matters is documentation, timeline, and leverage wielded calmly and swiftly. I head a department that routinely handles monthly six-figure contract disputes, and the fundamental lesson I've imparted to every trainee is this: the composed individual with solid evidence prevails every time. On that particular Tuesday, 3 days before the journey was due, when Bridget and I visited her family home in Warner Robins to resolve matters amicably, I had already anticipated what awaited me. I'd prepared a guest list. I'd saved and arranged screenshots from our group chat by date. I had tucked away in the recesses of my mind a phone number for a family law attorney named Priya Nakamura. I'd consulted her years prior for an unrelated estate matter with my father, and she was skilled in handling cases similar to this one instances involving documented histories of abuse and family members who attempted to conceal them. We gathered at her parents' kitchen table, joined by Denise, her brother Dale, Bridget's sibling, two of Denise's closest friends, Carol and Suzette, who seemed to function as some kind of informal family mediation panel. Their presence suggested the seriousness with which this family regarded external views on Bridget's personal life. I stated my concerns clearly. I explained that while having Mark present was tolerable, it was Colin who posed a problem. Colin had a history of abusing Bridget, backed by documented evidence. Bridget repeatedly declined his attendance on this journey, and I found it unacceptable to spend a week residing with a man who had inflicted pain upon my spouse, just a few rooms away, while everyone acted as if such an arrangement was acceptable. Denise's reaction is something that will stay etched in my memory forever. She placed her hands on the table, stared at me with the characteristic calm superiority she'd cultivated over years of getting her way within our family, and remarked, "Terrence, dear, it's merely a trip. Colin has significantly transformed since those times. He's undergone therapy. He's an entirely new person now. Bridget ought to release the past, and frankly, so should you. We've already given your ticket to Mark, seeing as you might not have wished to attend with all this turmoil in mind. Colin can occupy the spare room that becomes available. I want you to ponder on that statement for a moment, because I had to contemplate it myself, seated at that table beside my wife. My spouse's mother had previously given away my airline ticket. To Mark, Bridget's former high school boyfriend, she had secretly supported their union throughout our marriage. In the same breath, she made space for Colin, who had harmed her own daughter, justifying it as a mature, healing reunion. Placing Colin back in a house with Bridget was more of a disregard for us, rather than the family reconciliation she portrayed. I looked at Bridget, waiting for her to intervene and halt this immediately and decisively. Yet, for about 4 seconds, which seemed like eternity, she remained silent, looking down at the table. Carol, one of Denise's friends, intruded into the conversation uninvited, offering her unwanted opinion on the matter. To Terrence, it's often the case that a man's insecurity about his wife's past reveals more about him than anyone else. Suzette seemed to agree, nodding as if watching a tennis match and already deciding her stance. That's when you rose from your seat. You didn't shout, I should clarify, since I know how such tales often unfold, and this isn't one of those instances where you overturn tables in a blind fury. Instead, you stood up calmly, as you might during a call with a supplier on the verge of losing a contract, and you stated, Denise, you gave away my seat on a trip my wife and I were both planning to attend to a man neither of us required there, and you made space for a man who touched your daughter inappropriately. You refer to this as a family decision. I won't argue about whether Colin has changed. That's not the issue here. The matter at hand is that Bridget said no, and her no should have been respected. The conversation ended the moment she spoke those words. I've decided to exit this discussion as it's evidently not progressing. I looked at Bridget and stated, "I'm leaving. If you wish, you can continue conversing with your family." Approximately 90 seconds later, Bridget joined me by the car, tears streaming down her face, apologizing repeatedly. She regretted not stopping the argument when Denise mentioned Colin weeks ago, felt she had allowed it to escalate due to past experiences of confrontations with her mother never resolving positively in her favor. Watching me stand up at the table was the first time she truly grasped the severity of her actions. I trusted her then, and I trust her now. However, trust can't reverse weeks of choices, and I've been observing her family systematically disregard every boundary she attempted to establish, while hoping for a resolution by avoiding conflict long enough. That approach doesn't yield results. From every unresolved vendor negotiation I've encountered, evasion doesn't reduce problems, it increases their repair cost. That evening I made 3 phone calls, and things began to progress rapidly, so pay attention. The first call was to the firm managing the Hilton Head property. Since Bridget used our shared card for the initial booking, my name was also on it as a co-signer, which proved crucial. I informed them about an unagreed-upon alteration in the guest list and inquired about possible solutions. Renata, the property manager who seemed accustomed to handling family disputes in rentals more frequently than one might expect, clarified that, as a co-signer, I had the authority to modify or cancel parts of the reservation linked to my payment contribution. Called Priya Nakamura, the family law attorney, not regarding divorce. That night, it was about understanding a specific legal matter. Bridget's protective order against Colin had expired 11 years ago, but the police report and documented history remained in county records. Priya stated that although there wasn't an active legal restriction preventing Colin from attending a family trip, if Bridget wished to do so, she could formally document the pattern of familial coercion for potential future instances. Additionally, she confirmed my assumption. As a financial co-signer on a shared reservation, I had the authority to withdraw my share without seeking anyone else's approval. The crucial call was made to Bridget's brother, Dale, not for an argument, but due to Dale's role as an unwitting participant in the unfolding events. All his life, he had been manipulated by Denise, much like myself. I shared with Dale my impending actions and posed a single question. Is Bridget unaware that Colin has already secured a bedroom, or does she believe this matter is still open for discussion? Dale confided in me that Denise had revealed the decision to be final 2 days prior, long before Bridget learned about Mark's altered travel plans. This revelation exposed Denise's secret parallel planning of the trip, carried out without Bridget's knowledge. She finally broached the subject at the family gathering that night, only because I had started pressing questions she could no longer evade. The following morning, I accomplished 4 tasks before 8 a.m. I terminated our entire Hilton Head reservation, retrieving the deposit linked to our shared card, consequently canceling 2 of Denise's 18 booked rooms. It was her room for Colin that got canceled, as the rental accounting proved to be more complicated than anyone cared to explain. I purchased a one-way ticket, not to Hilton Head, but rather to Charleston, approximately 90 minutes up the coast, for both me and Bridget if she wished to accompany me. This was a destination we had discussed visiting for years, but never managed due to family obligations taking priority over our vacation time. I phoned Priya and requested her to compose a formal letter, not a lawsuit or threat, but a straightforward, well-documented one on company letterhead, detailing Bridget's history of abuse towards Colin Redding. I explained that any future attempts by family members to involve him in events with Bridget without her expressed, uncoerced consent could be seen as repeated coercion, and emphasized our expectation for this boundary to be upheld moving forward. Priya informed me such letters are seldom needed twice. Families that rely on deniability usually cease the behavior swiftly upon receiving a document bearing the name of a law firm. Prior to Bridget waking up, I sent her one text. I've canceled our trip's shared portion. Instead, I've booked us 2 tickets to Charleston whenever you're ready. No pressure, I love you, this isn't retaliation. The issue at hand is establishing a limit that Denise's family can't overturn, as evident when Denise learned about my action within minutes due to Renata, the property manager, contacting her directly regarding the unexpected decrease in room count. Soon after, my phone started ringing with calls from Denise, Roy, Bridget's father, and Carol, oddly enough, expressing their opinions on my marriage. I chose not to answer these calls, as I had no desire for a discussion dictated by their choice of words and tone, intended to portray me as the wrongdoer for refusing something that didn't require my refusal in the first place. Bridget phoned about 20 minutes later, which I answered promptly because this call differed from the previous ones. She was crying, but it wasn't the same emotional outburst from the previous night. Instead, there was a sense of clarity beneath her tears. "Mom just informed me you withdrew the reservations. She's furious." She claimed you humiliated her in the presence of Carol and Suzette. When I inquired from Bridget about the real issue, I asked, "Are you annoyed that I did it, or are you annoyed that your mom is upset?" After a significant silence, she eventually responded, "I'm not mad you did it." She continued, "I believe I needed you to do it as I was unsure if I could have otherwise." That moment, I realized our relationship would be all right. Not because the anger ceased, but because Bridget and I were, for the first time in 5 weeks, on the same side of the table, focusing on her family instead of ourselves. The events that transpired during the subsequent week is what I am most proud of in this narrative, as it wasn't dramatic like people often expect such stories to end. There was no heated airport confrontation, no public scene involving Colin himself, because Colin, surprisingly, withdrew from the trip entirely once he learned a legal letter bearing his name would circulate among the family. Apparently, a man with a past record of abuse doesn't seem keen on re-verifying and broadcasting his history to people he hoped had forgotten it. While Mark went to Hilton Head, Bridget learned that he felt uneasy whenever Denise discussed the potential changes in their relationship, which she apparently did multiple times, despite her daughter being 3 states away. Instead, Bridget and I opted for Charleston. We spent 7 days there, rented a bike, indulged in seafood at a location on Shem Creek that Bridget still reminisces about, and had more heartfelt conversations than we'd managed in the preceding 3 years altogether. During our talk, Bridget shared details about her upbringing with Denise that she hadn't explicitly spoken before, revealing how her mother had never truly relinquished control over Bridget's life narrative, and how the need to maintain Mark within the family circle wasn't primarily about him. The matter revolved around Denise desiring control over decisions made by her daughter a decade ago, which we didn't settle with divorce. To clarify, I want to dispel any misconceptions about the nature of our relationship. Instead of parting ways, we opted for a more challenging path. We initiated counseling sessions approximately 3 weeks following Charleston, and our counselor, Dr. Ferris from a practice in Macon, was instrumental in helping Bridget express that boundaries are effective only when one is prepared to enforce them, regardless of the person transgressing being someone cherished. Bridget had developed a lifelong aversion to confrontations with her mother due to past experiences where disagreements with Denise resulted in personal losses. As for Denise, she initially struggled to accept these realizations. For several anxious months, attending family gatherings felt like entering a trial I hadn't consented to participate in. However, around 4 months later, during Roy's 65th birthday celebration, Denise unexpectedly approached me in the kitchen. Without any prompting, she muttered an apology I had seldom heard from her before. "I didn't consider the impact on you of being in that house during those 5 weeks." I was more concerned about what the trip would appear like, rather than its costs for either of us. It wasn't a comprehensive explanation of her actions over the past 14 years, but it was a start, and I accepted it because, as I learned in logistics, you don't necessarily need a supplier to acknowledge every error. You just want them to modify their behavior moving forward. Fortunately, Denise did change, albeit gradually. Mark's name stopped being mentioned at Thanksgiving, while Colin's name was never brought up again. Often I ponder over that Tuesday at the kitchen table, less with anger now, more with a sense of understanding. For 5 weeks I extended trust, gave Bridget and her family the advantage of presumption, maintained my composure by not reacting impulsively. In another narrative, this story could have continued indefinitely, with me boarding the plane to Hilton Head, spending a week conversing lightly in a kitchen with a man who harmed my wife. This is what maintaining peace might have required of me. However, I hold no regret for the hours I spent being patient during those 5 weeks. Yet, I also have no regrets about the moment I ceased to be patient, because endless patience isn't virtuous. It's simply giving others the authority to overstep. If you've reached this point, here's what I want you to grasp. Boundaries that aren't enforced are not truly boundaries. Respect for one's decisions is lacking in those who don't respect you, treating them as flexible, changeable, and open to discussion at future gatherings. A canceled reservation, a ticket for a one-way flight, and a call to a lawyer were necessary steps for my wife's entire family to realize that my no and Bridget's no were firm refusals, not invitations for negotiation. The challenging part wasn't the confrontation itself. It was the 5 weeks preceding it, during which I harbored hope that someone else would resolve an issue that ultimately required my intervention to halt. Today, Bridget and I are in a good place. In fact, we're better than before this incident ever occurred, as we've finally learned how to stand united rather than me enduring discomfort to shield Bridget from conflict with her mother. Last spring, we returned to Charleston without family or drama, just the two of us cycling peacefully along the waterfront path. Since Bridget shared something with me that I can't shake off my mind, I've been reflecting on it. She confided in me that the Tuesday incident in the kitchen was the initial time someone had supported her without her even asking for it, throughout her entire adulthood. This story particularly resonated with me because I've realized that maintaining boundaries isn't just challenging with strangers, it's more so with family. It's simple to assert yourself when the person doesn't matter much. However, setting boundaries becomes a complex issue when it's your own mother or relatives. The fear of losing the relationship often prevents us from speaking up, and we endure longer than necessary. Nevertheless, silence also comes at a price. So I wonder, have any of you experienced something similar with your family? If you're new here, consider subscribing for more such reflections. There's plenty more to come.